Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to those of you who are joining us from across the world today for another edition of Pandemic Punditry, putting the planet on a pandemic diet, brought to you by the Content Experience Company. We are delighted and honored to have with us the co-founder and CEO of Planterra, Noam Sharon, with us today. They are an Israeli and US based company that is developing plant-based dairy alternatives that you can put in your tea and coffee. That also is producing things like drinkable yogurt, spoonable yogurt, spreadable cream cheese, and sweet puddings. That part I really like. And they've ingeniously branded their product Chickpea with CHKP as the brand name. That use chickpea as their co-ingredient, and Planterra claims that their chickpea protein isolate is a world's first. So we are thrilled to have you, Noam, on Pandemic Punditry. Welcome.
Thank you. My pleasure. Honored to be on your show.
Oh, it's great to talk to another person from the Israeli smart protein ecosystem. We've had a few people from that part of the world, and it's always interesting to talk to innovative companies from Israel. So I'm looking forward to an interesting and engaging conversation with you, Noam.
I hope everyone will have an interesting call, interesting conversation.
Yes, and if our audience has any questions, please feel free to ask those questions on whatever channel you're watching us on, and we'll be able to put those to Noam. So Noam, what inspired a very successful lawyer like yourself to start a plant-based business?
I was doing my former career. I usually call it my past life. I practiced in this career for almost 25 years, very successfully. And Israel is a small neighborhood. So I took many companies to the stock exchange, and I took them out of the stock exchange, and sold them, bought them, merged them, demerged them, anything you can think of. And at a certain point of time, I was starting to ask questions, which is a highly dangerous thing to do, risky thing to do, because once you start asking questions, you can't go back. And I asked myself if this is the only career I want to do ever, and if this is what I want to do in 5 or 10 years. And unfortunately, I didn't come up with good answers to that.
I think we may have lost Noam for a second there. Go ahead, Noam. Sorry.
Trekking in Ladakh, in the north of India, in the Himalayas, and trying to concentrate and meditate of what I'm going to do with my life and how happy I was and everything. And when I came back, I decided to pursue other paths, and it also took me a long time afterwards, like a year and a half or 2 years. And one day I came to my dearest team partners, and I told them that I was walking, and they were like, "The man gone crazy." And this is the part I like most, by the way. And I quit lawyering. And I started looking for something else. I did some stuff. I did some real estate, some corporate work. I worked for a family office in Europe, in the UK. Still wasn't feeling that I'm in my element. And then I met my co-founder, who is also Noam. And he comes from a totally different background. He used to be a chef in restaurants, and he had his own business of fresh, healthy, delivered food. I wish I would have joined him at that time, because I think we could pull something awesome together. And he actually introduced me to those worlds, to these universes of food tech, the Israeli protein ecosystem and everything. And he talked me into investing money and time in doing something in this space. So we started looking at projects, looking at companies, looking at technologies, and I outruled one after the other, not because they were not good, but because I wasn't, call it turned on or something like this. And then one day, Noam came with a story about a new protein, unlike any other plant-based protein. So I asked, okay, what is the big deal? And he said, no, you don't understand. It's unlike anything. You need to try it. You need to look into it. It's something totally different. So I was convinced to go to a meeting. Speaking, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. You just cut out there for a second, but I can hear you. Go ahead. So you went.
And the most impressive thing about this meeting was the samples that were on the table. No offense to anyone, but this was the most impressive thing. And there were like little snacks and a sweet condiment and a savory condiment, and I was blown away. I thought, Noam, how do they do that? To know today, I know exactly how to do it, and it's not to, And so we bought a 10-kilo sack, and we went to the kitchen at Noam's place, and we started experimenting. And before you even knew it, before we knew what was happening, we had our own lab, and we joined our team, currently our CTO, Asaf, who is a mastermind in plant-based protein. He's a veteran. Appreciated in the doing meat analogs before anyone even knew what it was. And we found ourselves with our own lab, with our CTO, with our lab assistant. It happened just like this, like in 2 days, I don't know. And for the last year and a half, what Asaf and Noam are doing, my role is just to make sure that they are in the lab, that they come to work in the morning. I don't do anything else. It's all their work. So Noam is the taste and the texture guy. Noam is a chef. He knows a lot about taste, how to make things super for people to taste. And Asaf knows the chemistry, the physics. He's a real professional. And what they have been up to the last year and a half is doing dairy alternatives. Because very early on, we decided to focus on dairy alternatives, both from economic reasons and because we found we understood that we are able to create a secret sauce that will hold them together and make outstanding product, and so we did. So today,
this is not just simply the core ingredient being a chickpea protein isolate. That's obviously a key component, but there is a secret sauce, as you just mentioned, in the way you use it or the way you formulate it, that gives your product a uniqueness or difference from all the other sort of plant-based dairy alternatives, I'm assuming.
Yes, because high quality as the ingredient may be, it needs to be tamed. It needs to be taught to become dairy alternatives, and it's actually like a game of chess. If you've seen the Queen's Gambit, there are like tens of thousands of combinations of process, of ingredients, of ways of doing things, and we were a little hopeless at the start because we couldn't find ourselves where we wanted in terms of R&D, in terms of development of the products. And we understand that there are certain ways to communicate with this protein to make it work the way you want it to work. And like I said, fortunately, we have Asaf with all his vast experience, and we created a highly proprietary body of IP, if you like, of know-how, of exactly how to overcome texture, taste, aromas, off notes, bitterness, everything that you usually find in plant-based protein. And now we find ourselves with a good deal of products that are ready to scale up, and that's actually what we are doing this day. We are taking care. We are facilitating our scale up, and concurrently we work on further products in the pipeline, making sure that the pipeline is always full.
So I think there was a great point of sort of insight there that maybe I want to make sure people understood. I think when you said you took the ingredient and then sort of went through sort of thousands of iterations of trying to coax it into to or in a malleable way to make it work for you. I think a lot of people think that just creating one of these things is getting ingredient A, B, C, D, and then trying that, and then throwing ingredient C out and putting E instead, and sort of messing around. But I think what you've done, maybe some advice there for others, which is take that one ingredient, but then work with that, over iterate that, and make sure that you've really given it sort of the full justice of what it can potentially do and not do, right? Because it's not going to just manifest itself as a dairy alternative. It's got to be worked through, and I think that seems to have been what you've done, and that body of knowledge is what you're calling your special IP, in addition to obviously the core ingredient being useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Because at first, as a newcomer to the space, I thought, well, what difference would it make? Some more of that ingredient, a little less of that ingredient, if you cook it for such and such minutes or differently, and it makes a world of difference. And actually, in the lab, we have a lot of conversations about different disciplines of cooking. And one of the conversation, an interesting one, I was totally unaware of it. Noam, my co-founder, my chef co-founder, he says that a good baker could become a good cook, but never the reverse. So I tell him, why is that? And he said, because cooking is very intuitive. Is trial and error. You can experiment, you can move to the sides, you can move up or down. Not like this in baking. Baking is very, very, very precise, reiterative. You need to do everything exactly as told and as you did last time. So we found out that formulating dairy alternatives is more like baking. It's a very, very precise process. Unfortunately for us, so there are no big secrets. In the end of it, you take the ingredients and you create the product. The secret and the edge that we have is that we have already been working almost 2 years on creating this and something that for me as an entrepreneur or someone who's already used to the off note of chickpea, I think I can think this is a great product. It tastes wonderful, but for the consumer, it won't pass. So you need to be consistent and make a point of doing it 100%, and that took us a lot of time and actually a lot of money. I'm very thankful for our investors that believed in us and for their trust.
So, Noam, are you institutionally backed, funded by venture capital, or are these home?
Actually, we are right now in the midst of a further round. Our third round of funding was from a local Israeli angel investors.
Okay.
Mostly people who know us, who know myself, and believed in the capabilities, in the execution capabilities. They didn't dive too much into the science, into the market, and so they were the first. And and then came other investors that that are not from Switzerland, from the US. And recently, and this is something that we are extremely proud of, we got an investment from a Singapore-based group, the Growthwell Group, through the Genesis Fund. Okay. They have, together with Tamasek and other investors, and we got an investment from them, which, besides from being very important for us as fuel to go further on the road, it's a huge vote of confidence that we are really proud of.
Oh, congratulations! That's great to hear. I know it's never easy. I mean, the the sector is obviously booming. There's a lot of money flowing in and out, but it's still an accomplishment to get the right kind of investor who's mission aligned to what you're trying to do. So it's always good when that comes true.
Absolutely, and I see how they work in their own places and in their own businesses, and I know that they are long-term players. And right now we felt that that's what we need for Planterra, long-term players. And right now the funding that we work to put in place is for the actual post scale-up pre-launch round, because we have actually secured the scale-up. We are contracting with the manufacturers, with suppliers, we did branding and design. And the current round that we are doing, and we are talking to VCs and to larger family offices, is to make sure that we can do the launch in a robust way, and make sure that we don't run out of fuel, in the middle of the road. And the way we launch and the timing and the means that we put into it, the resources we will be able to put on it, of course, will make a lot of difference on the future success.
So, Noam, is the ingredient that you're using, is that sourced from Israel or is that coming from overseas?
Most of the ingredients that we use, we source them in the US.
In the US, okay.
The protein is imported from the Far East. That's where it is processed.
Okay.
But all the other ingredients are local, are regional, and this has become in pandemic time. This has become of top importance because we found out that the US seaports are actually jammed.
Yes.
And no containers, no freight lines, and you can't get anything out of the seaport. So this is a major logistics issue. So we were glad that we were, I don't know, call it smart enough, but surely lucky enough to make sure that all our other sourcing is local in the States. Okay.
So let's shift our gears a little bit. I'm always sort of fascinated to talk to people from Israel because, for a country, it's certainly batting above its, fighting above its weight, right? I mean, in terms of it's a small country, small population, small market, but there's an incredible amount of innovation that comes out of it. I mean, we've seen this on the technology side, and now we're seeing this on the smart protein side. The sheer number of companies that are engaged in this smart protein revolution that are Israeli-based is incredible. What do you think is sort of driving that innovation? I mean, is there something that you believe that makes Israel unique in this smart protein space? Noam, are you there? Noam, did you get my question?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I have my own thoughts around it. I will try not to make it a too long or too boring lecture, but basically the link between Israel and technology started in the 30s of the former century, when persecuted Jews came from Europe, mainly Germany, Austria, Poland, and a lot of them had high technology skills. So actually, it was also a brain drain from Europe, and they started a lot of industries in the place, in the country, that didn't exist before. They were accountable for reinventing the construction business with technologies from Europe, and they started two very important technological institutes that are very active and very well known till today, which are the Technion in Haifa that was established by German Jews, and actually in the first year it was taught, the classes were taught in German, and the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. So this was the first step. The other step was when Israel found itself, like you said, a very small country, small population, surrounded with the hostile relationships, let's call it this way, with its neighbors. And it was also a very poor country. So one of the main principles of survival for Israel, for the young state, the young country, was not to rely on anyone, because there were ties with the Soviet Union and there were ties with the US, and in the first year they couldn't actually decide which one they like best. And so in producing food and defending the country, the people had to create their own agricultural technologies, and of course their own technology for defense, for security, which then evolved to numerous kinds of technology that don't necessarily have a lot to do with defense, with security or weapons. But this was the engine. It's an island economy. It's an island economy, small population that cannot afford to be dependent upon exterior. And right after the war in '67, the main, I don't know if this is boring or something, you feel free to stop me, but after the war in '67, until then, the main supplier of weapons to protect Israel was France. And then France decided that it casts an embargo, and Israel found itself, without. And this also made it very, very present and clear for the policymakers that the country could never afford itself to be too reliant on any external source. So there was a lot of emphasis on technological education and innovation, because some things you just need to create from start. So it went deeper and deeper into the culture, actually. And the fact that we in our generation can harvest the fruit from this is a blessing. And I believe the food tech is part of this.
Yeah, well put. I think it's interesting. Your concept of Israel being an island. I mean, obviously, that actually applies to even Singapore. So I think Singapore's got the similar mindset. So we're seeing a lot of innovation, especially in food tech, coming out of Singapore. And now they're having, I think, post the pandemic, similar ideas around self-reliance. Right? Singapore wants to be in a place where not so reliant on imports of all goods. So cell-based meat, for example, is sort of a great way for them to produce proteins at scale, which they wouldn't have been able to do because they don't have the land required for that. So I think it's interesting how these smaller countries are punching above their weight. I think that's a really interesting thing, and hopefully that serves as an inspiration to other small countries who might want to get into the smart protein space. I'm originally from Sri Lanka, which is a small island on itself, so I always try to draw parallels between Israel and hopefully inspire Sri Lankans to do the same, to sort of lift themselves out and not rely on the rest of the world. I think it's a really good story. Yeah. So Noam, you talked about sort of expanding, your product line. So what's next for you? I mean, obviously the funding, getting the product to market. Is your main market the US in the start, or is it Israel first? And what is your sort of go-to-market strategy for the short term and then for the longer term?
We choose the US as our main go-to-market target, mainly because of the almost infinite scalability. Because Europe is closer. You can get there 3-4 hours once lockdown is lifted. 3-4 hours of flight, you're there, you're doing business, you're making connection, wonderful. But then when we took a closer look, we understood that there's a great doubt if there's actually existence for something like European market. There isn't a European market. There's a French market and a German market and a Spanish market and a UK market. They all speak different languages, they all have different channels, and they also have different tastes. French people and German people can live 10 kilometers away from each other on the two sides of the border, and they like different foods. So having to restart every time you are successful was kind of deterrent. So we looked at North America, which is the most scalable market in the world. It's also a very tough market, a very competitive one, a very mass market. You can't do a brand without putting tens of millions of dollars into it. We are aware of this, but we are very, very excited. We are going to launch our own brands. We are going to be on the shelves later this year, and this is a super exciting journey. For other territories, we decided it may be a better idea for the first years to do strategic collaborations, to do licensing, to do joint ventures, and we are in negotiation with a very well-known leading European dairy processor to collaborate in R&D and to allow them to use our IP to create their products under their brand. They are excited about this too because they tested our products and they are very excited with them compared with all the alternatives that are today in the market. And we are also starting to look at collaborating with our strategic investor in Singapore to adapt to further develop the products so they could fit the markets in Asia Pacific. This is also something that we are very keen to do. We are very excited about. So this is the general picture. We had some thoughts of going to the market in Israel, but eventually we gave it out because the lack of scalability and the fact that the market is very, very centralistic. It's dominated by one or two players, and we didn't want, and we don't want now to join what you call a gorilla, a major player, because a very important part of this journey for myself, for Noam, for our board, is to stock or cash. It's less. We find it special, and if to do it in the States, not in Israel.
Okay. No, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, the market in Israel is probably also, while it might be a good place to start, it's obviously much smaller than the rest of the markets around. So that makes perfect sense. So Noam, I mean, once sort of this launch, is it just first going to be yogurt, or is it going to be the creamer? What's the first product out of the gate going to be for you?
Our plan, and that's what we are working. These are the trial runs that we are starting to do now for yogurt, both plain white and flavored, and for the cream cheese.
Okay.
The cream cheese is amazing. It's an all-American product, and we found out that there's a great crave in the market for good products in this space. Just to demonstrate. Over 30% of American households have tried plant-based yogurt, but the actual traction it has right now is around 7%. So wow. It's a huge gap. It's a huge gap because if you see milk, 70% of the household actually it has traction, actually using it. So when you see this gap between the rate of experience of trial and the rate of action, you understand that there's a lack of good products. So we believe that there's a huge opportunity there. There's a huge opportunity in the cream cheese. So that's where we are going to start. Okay, later on, we may enter the milk market.
So that's really interesting, this observation of the yogurt. I mean, 30% of people try it, but only 7% sort of stick with it. So obviously you're right. The taste and everything else must be a concern there compared to dairy, obviously. Yeah.
Yes, we feel that consumers are not as happy as they could be with good products.
So you must have done some, of your own sort of internal competitive analysis and tried other plant-based yogurts and all that. I've tried my fair share as well. What in your opinion, and I understand it's obviously your personal opinion on this. But what is so unique about your one compared to like some of the alternatives? I mean, what are you seeing lacking in the competitors that you seem to have fixed in your product?
That's a very central that's a very central questions that so.
Go ahead, no. You said that's a central question.
Lavindra,
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think is the answer to that? You said that's a central question.
that we put a lot of time in this. That
Noam, are you still there? Sorry, I think we lost you there for a second. Noam, are you still there? We may have lost Noam there for a second. If viewers and listeners can hold on for a bit, I'm sure he'll be back on. Noam, are you still there? Let's see whether I can get a hold of him. Sorry, Noam, I think you just dropped off as you were about to answer that question. Can you repeat the answer if you don't mind?
Yes, there is. If you look at it, there is a great difference between milk and the other products, yogurt, creamers, cream cheese, and the rest. The milk, the plant-based milk was there before, and it was before technology enabled the products to be similar or very close to the dairy reference. So now you have products that are very different from dairy milk in their taste, but consumers are okay with this because they had 15, 20 years to adapt and so they're used to it. They're not looking for the dairy, for the taste and the mouthfeel and the aroma and the feeling of the dairy reference anymore. In yogurt and cream cheese, it is different because of the low traction which this product has, and because they are relatively new, the consumers still expect to find something that is relatively close to the dairy reference, and that's where we nailed it, actually. Because and unlike milk, it has other physical qualities that are required that right now not all the products in the market, let's put it this way, can give the consumers. It's the way it melts on a hot toast. It's the mouthfeel you get when you mix it with other ingredients or you apply it to certain foods, and that's where we have that's where we feel we have something.
So Noam, I think that's a brilliant sort of way of answering that question, because I think your observation is probably correct. The 20 years that people have had to sort of get used to dairy alternatives, you don't have the luxury of that in the yogurt side because it's relatively new. And it does. Your point is that you have to make an exact analog of dairy. Of yogurt if you were to sort of be successful, right? In terms of mouthfeel, texture, taste, everything, right? So I think that's
the closest you can get.
That's a very good point. So Noam, thank you so much for sort of taking time off of your day to sort of speak with us and spread the knowledge and the wealth of the wisdom that you've gained in this new endeavor, and also to inspire potentially others who may want to sort of do a mid-career change in their life. Without coming to Lakda. That's great that you that you did that in the Himalayas. I'm still to do that living here in India, so it's on my bucket list, as we say. But Yeah, so that's an inspirational story all its own. That one does take stock of one's life at some point, and then decides it does this whole meaning, and what's the next chapter going to be. And I think that's very brave and courageous of you to do. And we wish you the best in terms of your future journey, and we'd love to try your product at some point in some part of the world whenever it's out. So keep us in the loop into terms of where you are, and we're really looking forward to sort of having a future conversation once you've launched.
Thank you. I'm sure to keep you posted, and thanks for having me. I was honored to take part in this call, and talk to you soon someday.
Thank you. Shalom.
When we are in the market. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.